Okay. So today we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with talking about the human influences on our ecosystem. So this is where we're going to be covering a really major topic. We are going to be talking about, uh, deforestation. We're going to be talking about eutrophication. We're going to be talking about how us as humans have affected the ecosystem, right? We're going to talk about conserving animal species, endangered animal species, and how we can possibly conserve them and keep them safe. So you remember when we did the topic of ecosystem, we did the entire concept. We talked about natural selection. We talked about predation, competition, evolution, all of that. So we have done that topic. So now that was what is happening naturally in the environment. Now we will take a look at what is our impact on this entire ecosystem. So let's go ahead and start. When we talk about the initial days, or when we talk about a long, long time ago, right? A long, long time ago, we humans, when we were on the earth, we were, there were a lot of limitations. There were a lot of limitations, for example, like food supply. Food was not that easily available. They had to either hunt the animals or they had to go out into the forest. They had to find food. They had to get fruits. They had to grow vegetables. They had to, do all of these activities. And because of, so they had to do all of these activities. Along with that, not only was the food supply limited, but along with that, you also had a few other problems. For example, no medical care. At that point, we did not have the medical care we have these days. If somebody got injured, they got injured. Plain and simple, right? The people would die at a young age simply because they don't have the medical help available. You did not have shelter easily available. You could not avoid weather as easily as we can in these days. So there were multiple factors, and because of that, the population of humans was limited, right? Now, what happened that over a number of years, we started to develop agriculture. We started to develop all this technology, and not only did that help the humans survive and thrive, it increased their lifespan and it increased their numbers. So initially, when the population of humans was controlled, regulated by the amount of food, by the weather, by the the technology at that time, so it was all limited. So the humans would fit right into the food chain. The impact of humans was not that significant because the population was regulated. Now, because agriculture has developed, we have so much medical help. Humans, like the lifespan of humans has increased significantly. It is now what we're observing is that we're observing that we are now starting to have a very, very serious effect on our population, on our ecosystem, a very serious effect on the environment that is around us, right? How now, let's go over this. How is it that we as humans, how are we as humans affecting our ecosystem? First thing, we are doing deforestation. We are doing deforestation for a number of reasons. We are cutting down trees. One of the major reasons why humans sort of started cutting down trees was to make space so they can grow more food. That was like the one thing that they were trying to do. That if they wanted space, they said we need space, we need to grow these crops. So how can I make this space? How can I go ahead and do that? So what they ended up doing was they started cutting down trees. They said we will cut down trees, and as we will cut down the trees, we will end up getting the space that we need for the for us to grow our crops, for us to start the process of agriculture, right? So that was one of the reasons, of course, they started doing deforestation. Another reason they started doing deforestation is, of course, you need wood, right? You need wood. You need wood for fuel, you need wood to, for example, make paper, you need wood for a lot of different reasons. And nowadays, you're also doing deforestation, not just for agriculture, but also to make buildings, right? So, the effect of deforestation, what has that been? One of the major effect of deforestation has been that we have destroyed habitats for animals, for wildlife. We have significantly destroyed the habitats of a lot of animals. One of the reason why you have so many animals that are considered to be endangered species, because of this particular deforestation. You know perfectly well how important, how many animals, or how important of a habitat a forest can be for a number of animals. Along with that, we're also affecting the climate. By removing the trees, we are removing plants that absorb carbon dioxide. As a result, what's happening? We're producing more and more carbon dioxide. At the same time, we're causing deforestation. We're cutting down the trees that remove the carbon dioxide for us. And the overall result is that the amount of carbon dioxide in our environment has increased, leading to global warming, climate change, and greenhouse effect. So, that is that is one of the ways that we are harming our environment. Right now, when you talk about fertilizers, we know how commonly we use fertilizers, right? Fertilizers are very commonly used so we can grow the crops, and that is something that's good for you, that's good for me, because it helps us grow our crops and we eat the crops, we use them as food supply. But these fertilizers are chemicals, right? They're generally made up of, ammonium compounds like ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, ammonium phosphate, right? So generally we have ammonium compounds like sulfate, nitrate, and we have fertilizers that have nitrogen, that have phosphorus, that have potassium, all of these things. Fine. By the way, you guys should know why these nutrients are so important. Why do plants need nitrogen? They need nitrogen so that they can make amino acids, and hence they can make proteins. Why do they need magnesium? They need magnesium to make chloroplast and trap sunlight. So, for example, if the plant is deficient in nitrogen, what will you observe? Stunted growth. The plant will not grow. If the plant is deficient in magnesium, what will you observe? Yellow colored leaves, right? So, you guys should know about this. Now, when you go ahead and talk about it, this these artificial fertilizers are good for us in the way that they're giving us the crops that you and I need to eat, right? But they cause a lot of problems. One of the problems that they cause is known as, let me tell you guys, this eutrophication. This is one of the major problems that is being caused by our fertilizers. Now, what is eutrophication? What is happening over here? Fine. Now, what happens is that you and I are giving these giving fertilizers to the crops. Now, what is going to happen that oftentimes or sometimes these fertilizers leach, they leach out of the soil and they flow down or they pass down into rivers, into lakes, into ponds. So they get leached out. The soil is not able to hold the fertilizer. They get leached out of the soil and they are going to go ahead and they're going to go to ponds, they're going to go to lakes, they're going to go to these bodies of water. Now, what happens because of this? In our lakes, in our ponds, we have a type of plant known as algae. Algae are these small microscopic plants, and you guys have seen them, they're quite common. Now, what happens is that when the fertilizer reaches the lake or the pond, the algae will start absorbing these fertilizers. When the algae will start absorbing these fertilizers, they will grow. And as they're going to grow, they're going to start to spread, and eventually they will end up making a layer of algae on the surface of the lake. So the entire surface of the lake or the pond is going to be covered with algae, like literally like a blanket, like a complete layer of algae. Now, what will happen? The sunlight will not be able to penetrate through, and it will not be able to reach the plants that are present inside the lake. The plants that are present in the bed, in the surface below, in the surface under the lake, those plants will not receive any sunlight, because all the sunlight has been blocked by the blanket of algae. As a result, what will happen? The plants inside the lake will die. When the plants inside the lake will die, the bacteria will start to break down the dead plants. That's what normally happens. We studied the nitrogen cycle, we studied about decomposition. So the bacteria will start to decompose, they will start to break down the dead plants. And as they will start to break down the dead plants, they will start using the oxygen for respiration. They will start using oxygen that is available, so that is available in the lake. They will start using it up from the for the process of respiration, because the activity of the bacteria has increased significantly. Normally you would have bacteria decomposing the dead plants, but normally the dead plants would be in smaller quantities because it's a natural process. Some plants will die, some plants will grow again, and the process is balanced. But in this situation, the plants are all dying, all of them, because none of them are getting sunlight. So the bacterial activity, the decomposition is really, really, really high. And because the decomposition is really high, the lot of bacterial activity is taking place, the oxygen inside the lake ends up getting used up. Eventually, the other aquatic life, the other marine life, the other fishes, the other animals inside the lake, they will also start to die because oxygen is no longer available. This entire process is known as eutrophication. The entire habitat, the entire ecosystem, all of the animals, all of the plants, everything has been destroyed because of using fertilizers. So this is known as eutrophication. So this is another effect. This is an effect that the fertilizers have on our environment, right? One of the effects. So this is a major way in which our interference or our actions are having an effect on what? On the um, ecosystem. Any confusion so far? Does anybody want to ask anything? Monami, Arisha, Janna, any question?
No, everything's clear.
Okay. Now we have something known as monoculture. This is another way we are harming the environment. What is monoculture, right? So monoculture is when you use the same land to grow the same crop again and again and again. So this year I used my land to grow wheat. The next year, I again used it to grow wheat. Then again, I used it to grow wheat. Then again, I used it to grow wheat. That is known as a monoculture. So generally, if you guys like ever look at farming, you will see that the farmers do a lot of rotation. So in one area, they will grow wheat. Then the next area, in the same area, they will grow some other plant, and the wheat they will grow elsewhere. Right? So they keep on doing these rotations. There's a reason for this. Now, why do we do these rotations? Why? What is bad? What is wrong with monoculture? Now, what is happening that I'm trying to grow wheat, right? Wheat crop. So what I will do is I will make sure that any plant that is competing with my wheat, any plant that is a competition for my wheat, any plant or anything that can harm my wheat, I will try to destroy it. So what's going to happen, that the balanced life, the balance of the ecosystem, the balance of the ecosystem that is taking place over there, that is going to end up getting destroyed, right? So what is going to end up happening, that whatever balance there was between the animals, because if you guys talk about it in an ecosystem, every single organism has an importance. You remove one organism, you can destroy the entire ecosystem. You guys have studied with me the topic of, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Just think of a food chain and imagine removing, for example, the primary consumer. Let's say you have a food chain, it's like grass, goat, lion. Remove the goat. Let's say you kill all of the goats. What will happen? The entire ecosystem is going to end up getting affected, right? So, when you're going to talk about it, one organism, even if one organism is removed from an ecosystem, the entire system is affected. So, when I'm doing a monoculture, I'm saying every insect that can harm my wheat crop, any plant that can compete with my wheat crop, anything that is harmful from my wheat crop, I'm going to destroy it. And eventually what's going to end up happening, the natural balance that is existing, that natural balance is going to be destroyed, right? And since it is going to be destroyed, that is going to end up affecting the entire ecosystem. Another way we are harming the environment, and we will talk more about this later on as well: pesticides, insecticides, herbicides. What are insecticides or pesticides? Insecticides and pesticides are chemicals we use to kill insects, and herbicides are chemicals we use to kill plants. Plants that we don't want, like weed, right? Weed is a plant that tends to, grow very easily, right? And the thing is that it competes with a lot of our natural plants. It takes away nutrition, it takes away food from the plants that we want. So as a result, the plants that our plants end up getting affected. So if we want our plants to grow, one of the things that we have to go ahead and do is that we often have to eliminate the weed. We have to get rid of the weed, right? So oftentimes for that, we have these herbicides, these chemicals. So when we are going to go ahead and talk about it, so remember when we talked about the monoculture? So whenever I'm doing a monoculture, whenever I'm trying to grow the same plant again and again, I need to make sure that any insect, for example, that can harm my plant, it is destroyed. So for that, I will have to use pesticides. Then any other plant that can compete with my crop, any plant that can take up space, any plant that can take up the nutrition or the sunlight that should go to my crop, I will want to kill it. For that, I will end up getting herbicides, right? Now the problem is this, that pesticides, herbicides, they all kill indiscriminately. What do I mean? Not only will they kill the harmful insects, not only will they kill the insects that are bad for my crop, they will also end up killing insects that are harmless. For example, they will end up destroying bees. And you and I both know, we have done pollination. We know how important bees are for insect pollination. So they will end up destroying, for example, bees. So that is the problem with insecticides, herbicides, pesticides, that you are not only changing natural balance, but they will kill it indiscriminately, meaning that both the bad insects are going, the harmful insects are going, so are the harmless ones. Now, another thing that we are doing that is harmful, selective breeding, right? We have all studied selective breeding in great detail. We have done this entire topic. We know exactly what selective breeding is. We know that selective breeding is basically What is selective breeding? We know that selective breeding is basically when you are taking when you're taking a desirable feature, right? Whichever feature is desirable for you, and you're taking the plants or you're taking the animals and you are breeding them together for the desired characteristics. You will choose the two plants, for example, that have the desired characteristics, and then you will go ahead and you will breed them to get the offspring. Then you will take the offspring, and from the offspring, you will again select those animals or those plants that have the desired characteristics, and you will breed those offspring with each other. Then again, from the third generation or from the second generation, again, you will see which offspring has the desired, which plants have the desired characteristics and breed them, right? That was selective breeding. So selective breeding can be done for plants and they can also be done for animals. So for example, you can do it for, farm animals like cows and goats. So animals that produce a high yield of milk or that are resistant to diseases, you can go ahead and you can selectively breed them. But how is this affecting the environment? We have done this quite a lot. If you open up, if you take a look at your entire, farming, we do this quite a lot. So when you're going to go ahead and talk about it, um, how is this affecting our environment? First of all, selective breeding is slow and expensive, especially in animals. In plants, perhaps not so much. In animals, it is definitely slow and expensive. Why? Because first of all, animals can only have a limited number of offspring, right? Think about it. Cows, they generally have like, they have like, or take a look at humans, or take a look at cows, take a look at goats. They have like what, one offspring, two offspring, that's it. And they breed once a year. So the entire process of selective breeding is quite slow and expensive. One another major drawback is that the entire set of genes is transferred, meaning that along with the desirable genes, you will also end up transferring the harmful genes, right? So not only are you passing on the good genes, but you might are also going to be passing on the bad genes. So this can end up causing what? This can end up harming, or this can end up, affecting the later generations. Because by selective breeding, we keep the good genes, but we also keep the bad genes. What is the second major drawback associated with selective breeding? Loss of variability. Loss of variability. What is loss of variability? Loss of genetic variation. We have talked quite a lot about genetic variation. We know exactly what genetic variation is. So the entire genetic variation is going to be lost because of selective breeding. So that is another way in which we are harming our environment. Another way in which we're harming our environment is by intensive livestock production. Livestock production are basically livestock or animals that are used as food, right? So when you talk about it, you guys, if you take a look into it, you will see that they're often like these areas, these cages where a huge number of chickens are kept all together. Or there are these huge areas, these sheds where a huge number of cows, a huge number of goats are kept all together. Right? Right? So when you go ahead and talk about it, this is intensive livestock production where we are producing these livestock, we're producing these animals, and we are producing them, keeping them in huge quantities. Now, why is this bad? Now, this is good for the farmers, or it's good for the people who are doing this, because they are managing to produce, they are managing to reproduce these huge number of, chickens, huge number of cows, huge number of sheep that they can sell for food, and they can make a lot of money. But how is this affecting our environment? This is affecting our environment in one way. First of all, if you're going to keep so many animals close together, the waste products produced by the animals will pass into the soil. And from the soil, they can pass onto the water and they can cause eutrophication. So eutrophication is not just caused by fertilizers. They're also caused by this intensive livestock production, because the waste products of the animals, they also have organic matter in it, and that organic matter allows the algae to survive. Secondly, overgrazing. Think about it. In one area, you're keeping a huge number of animals. The animals are constantly grazing. They're constantly eating what? They're constantly eating the grass. Now, if this is done to an excessive amount, what's going to happen? The grass is going to end up getting damaged, and what's going to happen? The grass is going to end up getting damaged. The soil is going to end up getting damaged, and as a result, no more grass will grow, and the soil will become eroded. So this is basically another way that's affecting our environment, right? So anyone has any questions so far? Is this all clear? Does anybody want to ask anything? Okay. Okay. So another way that we are harming the environment is by extraction of natural resources. What do I mean by natural resources? Fossil fuels, right? What we're doing when talk about fossil fuels, what are fossil fuels? Coal, natural gas, and our petroleum, right? Oil, crude oil. So when you talk about your fossil fuels, when you talk about fossil fuels such as coal, so then you have to mine the coal. You have to go into the mines and you have to mine out the coal. That is affecting our environment because we are damaging habitat. Not only are we damaging habitat, but all of the rocks, all of the, the waste produced in mining, that is just being thrown away, right? When you talk about it, water can become contaminated. So water near these mining sites, it can become contaminated by all the toxic metals coming from the mines. Oil spillages. When we make these oil wells are generally done underwater. Oil spillages can occur around it. When you mine for gold, for iron, for aluminium, you're also destroying a lot of the natural environment. So that is another way. Another way in which we are harming our environment is marine pollution. What is marine pollution? When we are harming our marine habitats, right? By throwing away, this is like the ocean and the sea, fine? We are throwing away untreated sewage that has not been treated. So right now what we do is we treat the sewage material, meaning that we ensure that it is completely clean, free of any toxic materials, free of any bacteria, free of any thing that can harm the environment. Untreated sewage material, if it's thrown directly into the oceans, it can cause severe damage. Fertilizers, we've already talked about it. Pesticides, we've already talked about it. Oil spillage, we have already talked about it. Another major problem is plastics. You guys know perfectly well that plastics are non-biodegradable. So they are not broken down. And since they are not broken down, what is going to end up happening? That they stay inside the oceans. The aquatic life, the marine life often confuse these particles or these plastics as food. They eat them, and of course, they are not digestible, right? So what they do is that they make the marine life sick, and eventually the marine life is going ends up dying because of this pollution. Okay, so that was a general overview of the entire effect of humans on the ecosystem. Now, there are certain concepts that we have to cover in more detail. So we talked generally about the effect of deforestation. Now, let's talk in detail. What is the effect of deforestation on the environment? For that, let's take a look at this. Fine. Now, what we're doing over here, deforestation. We have cut down the trees. Now, normally what happens is this, that whenever it rains, the roots of the trees hold on to the soil. They anchor the soil, right? They hold on to the soil, they anchor the soil, they keep it in place. They make sure that the nutrition, that the compounds inside the soil are not leached, that they stay where they are. But when we cut down these trees, what happens? When we cut down these trees, soil erosion is going to take place. What is soil erosion? The trees are no longer there to hold onto the soil. So, whenever it will rain, the layer of soil is going to get washed away by the rain. And as it is going to get washed away by the rain, it will end up going into your streams. It will end up going into lakes. It will end up going into ponds. And it will destroy the life, it will destroy the habitat over there. Along with that, flooding becomes more frequent, right? Flooding is a problem in certain areas. People who live close to the rivers, they are often these years, past years, flooding has become really, really, really common. And this is one of the reasons for it, right? Because what is happening, that there is the soil has been leached, the soil has been removed, it has all passed onto the streams, onto the lakes, onto the rivers. And what is happening, that since the soil is not there, whenever it rains, there is nothing there to absorb the rainwater. The soil is not there to absorb the rainwater. There's nothing to hold the rainwater. So what ends up happening, that the stream, the river, the lakes, they end up, getting filled with water, and the water overspills and it causes flooding, because there's no soil left to hold onto the rainwater. So all of the rainwater ends up in the streams, rivers, lake, and that causes, of course, flooding. And what will happen? That plants will die because of flooding, animals will drown, and the entire ecosystem is going to be affected. The third point we already talked about before, carbon dioxide buildup, right? We are producing a lot of carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels and all of that. But at the same time, we're cutting down trees that are responsible for removing the carbon dioxide. So, what is happening? The total amount of carbon dioxide is increasing, causing an increase in global warming and causing climate change. So, that is how deforestation is affecting, or the detailed process of how deforestation is affecting. So, this is deforestation. The soil is getting washed away from the area because the trees are no longer there to hold it, right? This is overgrazed land. So I was keeping my livestock stock over here, and the entire land is overgrazed. The soil is damaged and the soil is eroded. So over here, again, there's nothing to hold on to the rainwater. Then the water continues running down. It keeps on causing slow erosion, right? And eventually it passes on. It keeps on causing soil erosion. The water keeps on passing into the streams, and along with it, it's bringing all the soil with it. So what will happen? The habitat is going to inside the streams, rivers, lakes will be destroyed. At the same time, the streams, river, lake will be flooding, and it's going to end up causing damage to, of course, animals, plants, and everything else. So, right now, when we another major effect of, by the way, yeah, this deforestation. Another major effect of deforestation is not just all this. We have another major effect, and that is loss of biodiversity. We are losing biodiversity. What is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the diversity in the animal species, or not just in animal species, just generally diversity in within the biological organisms. So if you go to a forest, you're going to find so many different plants, so many different insects, so many different animals. At each trophic level, you're going to find so much diversity, so much different kind of species, right? But since we are destroying forest, we are destroying habitats. And since we're destroying habitats, we are doing what? We are causing loss of biodiversity. We are causing serious loss of biodiversity. Because what is happening, that since we're destroying these forests, we're destroying habitats. We're destroying habitats. So a lot of those animals, a lot of those organisms do not have the area to live anymore. So as a result, they end up dying, and we end up losing that diversity. We end up losing the different number of animals that were present. Now, let's talk about pesticides in a bit more detail, right? One pesticide that we have to talk about is known as DDT. DDT was a pesticide that was used at one point. We don't use it anymore. It was used at one point to control the spread of malaria. We have done the topic of diseases, immunity, and all that. You guys know perfectly well that malaria is what? Malaria is a disease that is carried by mosquitoes. The mosquitoes carry the malarial parasite, and when they bite a healthy person, the malarial parasite is passed onto the bloodstream, and the person's red blood cells end up getting infected. We know this entire story. So one of the ways that they were trying to control malaria is they were spraying this chemical, this pesticide. It was known as DDT. We don't use it anymore. Now, what actually happened because of it? This is important. So what actually ended up happening because of it is that this DDT, it doesn't leave the ecosystem. Once you've sprayed it, it stays within the ecosystem in small amounts, not in huge amounts, in small amounts. But this small amount was also bad, and it was also affecting our ecosystem. How was it affecting our ecosystem? Let me explain. There you go. So initially, what is happening that the DDT is found within the ecosystem. It can be found, for example, inside the lake. Fine. The DDT is found inside the lake. Let's say that the DDT or the chemical or the pesticide is mixed in with the water inside the lake. Now, what is going to end up happening? That you have these algae, you have these plants. These plants will end up absorbing the DDT. But since DDT is found in small quantities, it will not really affect them much. Now, what happened that you have, for example, animals. For example, you have shrimps. Fine, you have prawns. Those prawns are going to eat multiple plants. One prawn, for example, is eating 10 plants. So over here, let's say that in each plant, there was only 1% DDT. Fine. Now, what will happen? One prawn is eating 10 of these algae. One prawn is eating 10 of these algae. So, since the algae itself had a very small concentration of DDT, it was just 1%. But when one prawn will eat 10 algae, that prawn will end up getting 10% DDT. That prawn was eaten by fish. Each fish was eating 10 prawns. So that DDT concentration again increased. Then the small fish was eaten by the big fish. Each one big fish was eating 10 small fishes. So again, since the big fish is eating 10 small fishes, the concentration of DDT in the big fish has increased. And that big fish was eaten by a bird. One bird is eating 10 big fishes. So the amount of DDT that is going in the bird is huge. So what is happening that the pesticide becomes more and more concentrated between each trophic level. So at this trophic level, it was very weak. The concentration of the pesticide was really low. We were like, yeah, it's too low. We don't have to worry about anything. But what was happening between each trophic level, the concentration of the pesticide kept on increasing. Why? Because at each trophic level, when you're going to talk about it, one goat is going to eat a huge number of plants. One lion is not going to eat one goat. One lion is going to eat multiple goats. So whatever the concentration of DDT inside the goats, it will add up. The total concentration of DDT inside the lion will be much more. So between each level, the amount of pesticide keeps on increasing. This is not just for DDT. By the way, DDT was then removed. We stopped using it after we figured this out. But this is true for all pesticide, right? So this is how the pesticide affect our food chain, right? So these so this is basically how the insecticides are damaging our food chain. Now, another thing we talked about was herbicides. Now, let's look in detail the effect of on herbicides, or what is the effect of herbicides. So, herbicides generally you use to control plants that are competing with the crop plant. So, whatever crop plants I have, so if there's any other plant that is competing with my crop plant, I will want to kill it. So, for that, I use herbicide. Fine. Now, if I don't remove these plants, if I don't remove the competition, my crops will not be able to grow the way that they should be growing. And my crops will be affected. My business will be affected. So, what happens? Now, so for this, we use herbicides. One problem again with herbicides is that they kill indiscriminately. So they kill the good plants, they kill the bad plants, but fine. So now what is going to happen that if these herbicides often leach from the farmland, they often move from the farmland and they travel down the soil into rivers and lakes. And what do they do in rivers and lakes? When they reach the rivers and lakes, they start killing the plants in the rivers and the lakes. This is what I meant. They kill indiscriminately, right? They kill indiscriminately. They are not, they fine, they were killing the weed, that was good, we were getting our crops. But these herbicides can then enter on rivers and lakes, and they can actually kill aquatic plants. They can kill the plants that are found in lakes and rivers. As a result, herbivores will lose their food supply. Herbivores will not have the aquatic, the plants anymore, and they will suffer and they will die. And when the herbivores will die, of course, the carnivores will also be affected. So these were the ones that we had discussed. Now there's another impact that we did not talk about before, and that is nuclear fallout. What is nuclear fallout? Nuclear fallout can be because of radioactivity. Radioactivity either due to a nuclear explosion or due to a leak from a nuclear power station. So sometimes nuclear power stations leak, sometimes you of course have nuclear explosions. Both of these things can end up causing radioactive particles that can spread throughout the area and have very severe effects. When we talk about it, so if you guys, for example, take a look at Japan and Hiroshima and all those areas. So the explosions that took place over there during war, those explosions, the radioactive particles that got left behind, they caused severe damage to animals, to plants, to humans. They caused mutations, they caused birth defects. This seriously affected the ecosystem, right? And what happens that radioactive particles, because of these nuclear explosion or something like that, these particles have a long half-life. You'll study half-life when you guys do physics. Point is that it stays in the environment and it takes a very long time to break down. Because of that, it is absorbed by living organism, and the biomaterial accumulates. Just like these pesticides, like this, the radioactive material accumulates, and it can end up causing problems like birth defects, it can end up causing problems like mutations and cancer. Another way we are seriously affecting our environment is by chemical waste. We are producing a lot of poisonous waste products. A lot of our industrial processes, electroplating, a lot of our industrial processes that we do, they produce a lot of waste products. And one of the ways the factories, the industries get rid of waste products is often by dumping it into rivers and lakes. Not only can that cause damage to us humans if we drink the water, but it also damages the animals and the plants that can be found over there. We have already talked about what is eutrophication. Now, Let's go ahead and talk about acid rain, something that you guys probably already have a good amount of idea of. What is acid rain? So generally when we talk about it, acid rain is produced by oxides of nitrogen and sulfur. Nitrogen oxide and sulfur oxide is often produced by factories. Nitrogen oxide, by the way, is also made in car engines. Generally, nitrogen is an inert gas. It does not react easily. But inside the car engines, inside the high temperature of the car engines, the nitrogen can react with oxygen and it can give you nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen oxide is also produced by factories. Sulfur dioxide is produced because of fossil fuel. When you burn coal, so in coal, small amount of sulfur can be found in the form of an impurity. So whenever you burn coal, the sulfur will also burn and it will react with oxygen to give you sulfur dioxide. So what happens that the nitrogen oxide and the sulfur dioxide, they react with the water vapors in the environment, in the air, and they make sulfuric acid and nitric acid. The sulfuric acid and nitric acid will then, condense into clouds. And when the clouds will produce rain, that rain is going to be a mix of sulfuric acid and nitric acid. So how is that going to damage the environment? First of all, it's going to destroy the trees. And the trees will get damaged, the plants will get damaged because of the acid rain. Not only that, it also changes the pH of the soil so that plants are not able to grow properly. It also passes on into the lakes and rivers. And when it goes into the lakes and river, it harms the aquatic life and the marine life, killing the plants and the fishes and the animals that can be found in lakes, rivers, and streams. So this is another impact of humans on our ecosystem. Anybody has any confusion? Does anybody want to ask anything so far? Guys, everyone, this is clear? Monami, Janna, Arisha?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things, okay. One of the things we have to then again talk about is we have to talk about sustainable resources. Sustainable resources, what are sustainable resources? Sustainable resources are those resources that can be produced almost as quickly as it can be removed, right? That whatever resource that I'm using, as quickly as I'm removing it, I can also replace it. I can also reproduce it, right? That is known as a sustainable resource. Right now, you guys know perfectly well that fossil fuel is considered to be a non-renewable resource. Nuclear power is considered to be a non-renewable resource, right? When you're going to go ahead and talk about them, coal, oil, natural gas, all of these are found in very limited quantity. Eventually, at one point, we will run out. We will have no more of these resources left. And as a result, we will not have the resources needed for a lot of our energy processes. So when you go ahead and talk about it, you guys know we have hydroelectric, we have wind, we have wood, we have plants. All of these are considered to be sustainable resources, right? So when you go ahead and you talk about your sustainable resources, we can use plants, by the way, to make ethanol. It's known as bioethanol, right? Ethanol is a good fuel. It's a good source for a fuel, and we can use it generally to, a source of energy. We can burn it to produce energy instead of burning fossil fuels. Now, when you talk about ethanol, right, you guys would have one question. Why is ethanol considered to be a good fuel source? Or why are we considering ethanol to, be sustainable? The reason your ethanol is considered to be sustainable is because, of course, we can always grow more plants, right? We're getting it from plants. We can make the ethanol from plants. It's known as bioethanol. We can get the ethanol from plants, and then we can simply grow more plants, and it's sustainable. We won't be running out of it. Now, second thing you guys would question is the environment. Is it safe for the environment? Is it good for the environment? Bioethanol is uh, better for the environment because it is carbon neutral. What do I mean by carbon neutral? I mean, carbon neutral is when you are producing as much carbon dioxide as it is being removed. Meaning that when I burn the bioethanol, I'm producing carbon dioxide because I'm doing combustion reaction. I'm producing carbon dioxide. But the amount of carbon dioxide that is produced by burning that ethanol, that carbon dioxide will then be taken in by the plants I will grow. Because to make the ethanol, I need to grow plants. So I grow the plants remove carbon dioxide. I burn ethanol, the carbon dioxide is released. So the plants are taking in the carbon dioxide, and the amount of carbon dioxide produced by ethanol is pretty much the same. So overall effect is that the carbon dioxide does not increase. Whatever carbon dioxide is being removed, that is the same amount as being produced. So it's carbon neutral. So even though burning bioethanol does produce carbon dioxide, but the amount of carbon dioxide produced is then removed by the plants when we grow them. So the overall effect is nullified, it is carbon neutral. So that is another renewable, sustainable resource. But the problem with bioethanol is that bioethanol, even though it's being used quite a lot, you can't grow it or you can't make it in really huge quantities because the amount of plants needed to make enough ethanol to actually start sustaining our industries and to start sustaining our factories, that amount of ethanol requires a huge number of plants. And we simply don't have the land available to grow so many plants and grow our crops. So if we start using the land to grow plants so we can make ethanol, we won't have any land left to grow our crops. So that is the problem with bioethanol. But bioethanol is a very good sustainable resource. It's a renewable resource and it's carbon neutral. Wood is carbon neutral and it's renewable, right? Sustainable. So now we have to go ahead and we have to move on to sustainable resources to basically reduce our impact on the environment or to reduce our impact and make, you know, uh, um, solve the problem. Does anybody have any questions? Is this all clear? Okay, so in this topic now, what we have to go ahead and talk about is we have to talk about bioconservation of animal species. So I told you guys, remember when we started the topic, I told you guys that a lot of animal species are endangered. A lot of our animal species are, dying, or not only a lot of animal species are now extinct, sadly. We don't have any more of those animal species, and a lot of our animal species are currently endangered where their numbers are reducing drastically, and if we don't do anything about it, they might end up becoming extinct as well. So the way we prevent it from happening is by doing something known as conservation. We do conservation to protect the species and to ensure that these endangered species are actually protected. There are multiple ways we can do this. So we do something known as captive breeding and reintroduction, right? So what is reintroduction? That when we take an animal from captivity, we don't directly release them into the nature. We first transition them. We first keep them in these conservation areas. We will allow them to get adjusted. We'll allow them to get accustomed to the nature before we actually release them into the wild. So we have conservation centers, we can do reintroductions, we have seed banks that allow us to protect plant species, and we have multiple other ways in which we can prevent species from actually end up going extinct or going dying out, right? This is especially for endangered species. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we will stop it over here for today. In the next class, we're going to continue from here, from conservation of species. We'll talk about the different ways we can use to conserve species and to conserve biodiversity. These terminologies are important. Fine. So we will continue from here off. We will talk about the different ways we can do the entire process, and we'll finish off the topic in the next class. Any question? Anybody wants to ask anything related to this topic? Monami, Arisha, Janna, all clear? Okay. Okay, guys. If